What's up, guys? Justin here with the SketchUpEssentials.com. So in today's video, we continue our series on getting started in SketchUp free by modeling our cabinets and counters. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. All right, so modeling cabinets and counters is something that's interesting because it's a very repetitive process. And so I'm going to show you a process where you can model kind of a dynamic base, or not a dynamic base because you can't use dynamic components in the web version of SketchUp. There are some like live components that you can download from the 3D warehouse, but I'm going to show you how to model these manually because most of the stuff in the 3D warehouse just isn't quite suited for what we need. And so one of the things you need to decide is the level of detail that you want to use for cabinets. And so these are some cabinets that I've created inside of the Pro version of SketchUp, and you can see how they're fairly detailed, right? We have like the stretchers in here. We have things like drawers and other things like that. You can definitely model those things if you need them, but you can also get a lot simpler, which is what I'm going to show you in this video. And so we'll just assume that our cabinet base is going to be 24 inches deep, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the line tool by tapping the L key. And remember, it's important that you've tagged all of your walls and doors so that you can toggle them off, and also so that they're not going to be merging with this geometry in here. So now what I want to do is I want to activate the line tool, and I'm just going to draw a line out 24 inches. We're going to assume this is going to be 24 inches deep. And then in this case, this looks like it's going to be approximately 36 inches wide. So we'll just type in a value of 36, and I'm just going to close in this shape right here. And so now what we have is we have basically the base size of our cabinet. And so from here, we kind of want to decide how detailed we want to get with this cabinet, right? So we can model this out with a whole bunch of parts and pieces, or we can also model this out as kind of a block. In this case, we'll go ahead and do some of the parts and pieces in here. And so the first thing to remember when you do this is when you first model out your cabinet, this is actually going to be 4 inches back because it's going to have a kick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line that's going to be 4 inches back right here. Then I'll draw a line across right here. And for now, you can erase out this edge. So you can tap E and click and drag across it. But what I want to do is I want to offset this in. So I'm going to tap the F key, and I'm going to offset this in by 3/4 of an inch, because I'm assuming this is going to be made of 3/4 inch plywood or wood boards or whatever you're going to use. So you can pick your own dimensions if you want to make it with something else. But for now, I think that's going to be fine. And then I'm going to select this face right here, and I'm going to hit the delete key. Well, now what we can do is we can push-pull this up by 4 inches, because we're going to have a 4-inch kick back, and we're going to have a 4-inch piece forward. And so now we've got kind of the base of our cabinet. And so now what I want to do is I want to model out the sides of my cabinet. So I'm going to draw a line out 4 inches, and I'm going to draw a line over 3/4 of an inch, right? Because that's going to be the thickness of this piece right here. And so now we've got the kind of side piece on our cabinet like this. And so now what I want to do is I want to split off this front side. So I'm going to draw a line across the edge, because what we're going to end up doing is we're going to extrude this up to whatever we want the actual height of our cabinets to be. But before we do that, we need to split off this other edge. Now, one thing I do a lot of is I use the flip tool in copy mode in order to create copies of things so that I don't have to remodel them. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to double click on this object, and I'm just going to use the move tool in copy mode to copy it across here so that I don't have to redraw it. So I'm just going to double click, tap the M key, and click on this corner. And remember that you want to tap Control in order to go into copy mode. And then what I can do is I can just draw a line across right here, like this. Well, now what I can do is I can draw this up to whatever I want the actual height of my cabinet to be. And so what I want to do is I want to draw either a line or a guide up, and I'm assuming that this whole thing is going to be about 36 inches high, right? So I'm just going to draw a line that's going to be 36 inches from this corner right here, and I'm just kind of using that as a guide point. So we'll type in 36, draw that line right here. Well, then remember that you're going to have a countertop on here, and I'm assuming my countertop is going to be 1.25 inches. So I'm just going to draw a line back down. It's going to be 1.25 right here. So now I have a little segment that I can extrude to. Well, now what I want to do is I want to push-pull this up right here until we get to that segment right there. So we've push-pulled this up right here. I'm going to do the same thing on these front pieces. Remember, you can double click with the push-pull tool active in order to redo this right here. Okay, and so now that we've push-pulled this up, what we need to do is we need to draw the base of the cabinet, which is going to go inside of this space right here. And then we also need to draw just kind of a stretcher across the front. Remember that we're going to model doors on top of this, so we don't need to fill this in with like a solid piece. And so what I want to do is I want to start by using the rectangle tool. So I'm going to tap the R key. I'm going to tap the up arrow key in order to lock this to the blue axis. And I'm just going to draw a rectangle all the way to the back here. And so now what that does is that gives me the ability to push pull this up by 3/4 of an inch right here. And I'm just going to double click on these two faces in order to repeat that. And then once I do that, I can erase out my extra geometry right here. Now, in the case of your stretcher piece, and I'm going to go ahead and erase out this extra geometry because we don't need it anymore. So in the case of your stretcher piece right here, what I assume that's going to be is I assume that's going to be just kind of a little piece like this one that runs across the face of your cabinet. So what we want to do is we're assuming this is probably going to be, I'm assuming this is just going to be a 2.5 inch piece. So I'll just draw a line that's 2.5. Then I'll draw another line down that's going to be, call it 3/4 of an inch right here. And then we can just select this face and push pull it across like this. Now, right here. Now, I do like keeping a line on here on either side just because it gives me kind of a visual indicator that this is a separate piece in here. Now, from here, you can get as detailed as you want, right? If you wanted to, you could select this piece and make a copy of it to the back using the move tool in copy mode. If you wanted this to look a little bit more realistic, that's an easy way to do that. That's kind of up to you. But now that I've got this whole, I call it the cabinet carcass, but you can call it whatever you want. And I'm going to go ahead and right click on this face and I'm going to reverse it so that the proper face is facing forward for me. What I want to do now is I want to take this whole thing and I want to put it in a group. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to right click and I'm going to make it a group. Now, if you're going to reuse this and it's going to be the same size, you could make this a component instead. But what I like to do is I like to set these carcasses up like this because they're easy to adjust. Because what I can do is I can use the sticky geometry in the model in order to adjust this. And so at the moment, I think these are all going to be the same size. I think I kind of modeled them that way. But in this situation, if you did want to make an adjustment, all you have to do is double click into this object and you can just select that raw geometry, right? Because I don't have a whole bunch of nested groups in here. I can just select that raw geometry and you can actually use the move tool in order to stretch this object as long as you move it along the green axis. And that as long as you move it along the green axis is very important because if you don't, right? If you move it in a different direction, you're going to start getting this nasty distortion. But if you select the entire set of geometry on this wall right here and you move it over, you can use this in order to change the size of this cabinet carcass really quickly. And so in this situation, all I'm going to do is I'm going to use the move tool in copy mode right here, and I'm just going to create a copy. And I'm just going to reuse this. And so we're going to have an oven right here. And then in the corner, we'll have a corner cabinet. So we can go ahead and work on that one really quick. And so in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to draw a line out. And again, this is going to be 24 inches. But remember that for our base, we're going to have a 4-inch kick. So we actually want this base piece to be offset back by 4 inches. So the easiest way to do this is assuming this is all aligned properly, and you want to make sure that you do have it aligned properly, but you can just draw a line across and you can just use inferencing. So you can hold the shift key when you're along the red axis and you can draw a line right here in order to figure out how long that line is going to be. Now, one thing that I like to do with something like this, because I want to make sure I'm doing everything uniform, is I use the rotate tool in copy mode to copy edges across instead of redrawing them. Because in this situation, it's not that big of a deal, right? This is 2 foot 10 inches. That's really easy. But I want to make sure this is exactly the same length every time. So usually what I'll do is I'll select the edge, tap Q, I'll tap the up arrow key. That activates the rotate tool and locks it to the blue axis. And then I'll set a base point here. Click here to set my target point, and I'm going to tap Control in order to go into copy mode. So notice if you don't go into copy mode, it's just going to deform your edge. But if you do tap Control, it's just going to create a copy right here. But then we'll just do the same thing. So this is going to have that same length of 1 foot 8 inches as the other one. Then we'll draw a line across. Now we'll do the same thing we did before where we tap F, offset this in, by 3/4 of an inch and delete out this face. And then we'll just push pull this up to that same height, which is going to be 4 inches right here. So now we're going to have kind of an overhang or overlap on this one. And so in order to go to the next step here, all you have to do is just draw a 4-inch edge here and draw a 4-inch edge here. And then you can draw this line across. And then you can select these 3 edges just by doing a shift click. And you can just offset this in by 4 inches or 3/4 of an inch, sorry, right there. And so you can go ahead and you can complete the edge on either side in order to split these out. And then we're ready to extrude this up. And again, remember that we want to draw a line across here and across here because this is going to get left open. And so we'll leave those extra edges alone for right now. But what I want to do is I'm just going to push pull this up to the same height as the other cabinet, like this. We do the same thing with this face and the same thing with this face. And it's a little bit up to you how you handle this front corner. So a lot of people might come in here and instead of having this have an angle, what you might do instead is you might have this be square or flush. That just kind of depends on how you want your door to sit in here. So you could push pull this extra piece up here if you wanted to. I'm just going to leave it as is for right now, but I'm just going to erase out these extra edges right here like this. And it looks like one of my faces got deleted. So I'll just draw a line across here, here, and here in order to heal that face back in. And so now what I need is I need a base piece that's going to be 3/4 of an inch thick. So I'm just going to draw a line to the back along the green axis right here. We'll draw a line across right here and a line across over here. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to have this face where I can then push pull this up 3/4 of an inch. And we'll just do that again, again, and again right here. And you can erase out those extra edges for the most part. And so in the case of this corner cabinet, it's almost probably going to be easier to just draw a rectangle across the face right here. We're going to delete out this top piece. But in the case of this corner cabinet, this is going to have some kind of a frame built out on the front so that you can put the door on it. So we're just going to use the offset tool on this piece right here. And we're going to say that this is going to be, we'll call it 1.5 inches right here. So that'll give us our opening. And one thing you probably want to do is erase out this bottom edge first, but then I'm going to offset this in by 1.5 inches right here, and that's going to give us our frame. And so in this situation, I might just try to push pull this back and just tap the control key to go to create new face mode. And then I'm just going to push pull this to the back side right here and delete out the face. So now I've got kind of the face frame in here like this. So now we've got our corner cabinet in here ready to go. And we are basically ready to start adding cabinet doors. So what I want to do is I want to take this object, I want to right click, and I want to make it a group. So I want to group it so that it's not in the way. And then I'm going to use the move tool in copy mode in order to create a copy of this base right here. And then I'll just tap Q, tap up, and single click, and rotate this over right here. I'm going to leave this the same width rather than trying to adjust the width of the cabinets in here. But then I'm just going to use the move tool in copy mode like this to copy this over. And now I've got my bases pretty much ready to go. Well, now at this point, we're ready to add doors to our cabinets. And so doors are actually not all that difficult, especially when your cabinets are all the same size like this. And I have an extra edge in here. I'm going to erase it. So the way that I handle my doors is I will just draw a rectangle across the face like this. And one thing that I try to remember is you're usually going to have a little bit of a gap in here. So you don't want to model out your doors and then have them be this full width in here, because if you do that, then your cabinets just look like these giant slabs, right? There's no actual gaps in there. So I like to actually put the gap in here because it gives me a good visual indicator of how the cabinets are actually going to come together. So in this case, I'm just going to use the offset tool, and I'm going to offset this in by 1/8 of an inch because I think these are going to have an 1/8 of an inch overlay on them. Now I've got some extra geometry around the outside. There's a quick tip that you can use to delete out these extra edges because you don't want to keep those in there. It's just a bunch of junk geometry. So what I'll do is I'll double click on this face and then I'll do a shift double click because that'll pick up this face and its surrounding edges. But then I do a shift double click again and notice how it deselects this face and the surrounding edges like this. Well, now all I have is this extra face and this extra edge selected. So I'll run through that one again because it's a little bit tricky. So basically the way that works is double click, shift double click, shift double click. That deselects this face and then I can just hit the delete key and you can see how that's going to erase out this edge right here as well as the extra face, so that you don't have a bunch of extra geometry in here. Well, now remember that in the middle, you really only want an overlay of a 1/16 on each side. So I'm going to move this back a 1/16 along the red or the green axis. Make sure that you're doing this directly along the green axis. Remember, you can tap the left arrow key and then type in 1/16 in order to do that if you want to. But now we're just going to assume these are just regular slab style cabinets. So I'm just going to pull this out by 3/4 of an inch right here. Well, now what I can do is I can select this door, right click and make it a component. And we're going to call this cabinet door 1. Click on create. Well, now I can just use the flip tool in copy mode in order to create a copy on this other side. Now you could do it the other way, but the problem is if you try to use the move tool in copy mode right now, you're going to have it on this edge, which is not what you want, right? Remember, you need an 1/8 of an inch gap on that side. So the easiest way to do this is to select the door, use the flip tool, and click and drag. Remember, you can click and drag these planes, but you can tap the control key to go to copy mode. Well, I can just find the midpoint of this object and just flip this over right here. And now this has been flipped across the middle, so I maintain that 1/8 of an inch gap like this. Well, now we can just use the move tool in copy mode again in order to create a copy like this. And we want to do the same thing over here, but we want to rotate it. So a lot of the time it might be easier because these are oriented differently. You might actually use the midpoint here as your base point. So we're going to use the move tool in copy mode. We're going to move over here. Because then what you can do is you can use the rotate tool. So you can tap Q, tap the up arrow key, single click, and rotate right here. But it maintained that same point because we use the midpoint as the base point right there. And then we can do the same thing here where we can use this point as our base point when we use the move tool in copy mode right here. Well, now I've got all of these doors in here. Well, the cool thing about the way that we created this, and there might be a little bit of work we have to do on the corner in order to get this to fit in here. I'm not going to get like way in depth on that right now. But the cool thing about this is because we modeled these all as copies of the same component, say that I decided I wanted this to be a different style. So say I wanted this to have maybe like an 1.5 inch piece right here, and I wanted this to have a little bit of depth to it. I could just pull this back by maybe like 1/4 of an inch or maybe a 1/2 inch right here. And notice how all those doors are going to change because they're all copies of that same component. So then I'm just going to do the same thing here where I draw a rectangle across the face like this. I'm going to offset this in by 1/8 of an inch. And I'll do a double click, shift double click, shift double click. And I'll delete out that edge. And then I can pull this out by 3/4 of an inch as well. Now, you do have some issues with this corner that you would have to figure out. So one of the things that you might do is you might have kind of a little bit more of a space in the corner between these cabinets right here so that you've got room for that door to move. So you could maybe move this over a little bit. Maybe like 3/4 of an inch in order to give that door room to move. You just have to be kind of cognizant of what that does on this side right here. But then we'll just do the same thing. We'll pull this in by 1.5 inches. Then we'll pull this back by 1/2 inch. Then we'll take all of that and we'll put it in a group. And so this is basically how you would model all of your cabinets inside of your model. So you would use the same process for the side cabinets and the same process for the uppers. It's just the uppers wouldn't have the base on them. And so the other thing that you're probably going to do is, I like to take all of these doors and cabinets and put them in an overall group. So I like to take these, put them in a group, then I like to add a tag for ARCH-cabinets. We're going to go to entity info, and we're going to put those on the cabinets tag. So what that does is that gives me the ability within my tags section to toggle cabinets on and off, doors on and off, whatever I want. But now what we're going to do is we're going to model our counters. So our counters are going to basically have this full depth of 24 inches plus 3/4 of an inch, and they're probably going to have a little bit of an overhang too. So maybe like a 1/2 inch overhang. But then I'm going to draw a line up, give it thickness. So I'm going to assume this is going to be 1 1/4 inches right here. And I might add just a little bit of a bevel on the front. I don't want to get too crazy with it. And then I'm just going to extrude this across like this. And so one other trick that I really like is if I double click on this face and then I use the move tool in copy mode, I can create a copy of this countertop profile right here. And then I can use the rotate tool in order to rotate it. Okay, so in this case, instead of me trying to manually model this, right? Because you're going to extrude this profile across, but then you need it to turn the corner here. One thing that I find extremely helpful is I can use the follow me tool in order to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a path here, but then I'm also going to draw a little bit of a path here so I get some overlap, because otherwise this kind of like doesn't do the final orientation on the side and it doesn't give you a very good result. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select those edges. I'm going to go find the follow me tool. You might need to click on the 3 dots in order to find it, but it's going to look something like this, and then you're just going to activate it. And so what that's done is that's come through here, and that's basically made this turn the corner. Well, all we have to do to fix this back piece is just rotate around the back side and just fill that in and extrude it up. Now, this is another example of why organization is important, because what I want to do is I want to do an arch exterior or wall dash exterior, and I also want to do an arch dash wall dash interior. And so what that does is that allows me to put those groups on a tag. So we're going to tag this one with the exterior. And we'll go ahead and we'll turn that wall off. We'll turn this wall off. What that does is that gives me the ability to get in here and fix this counter. So for this counter, I'm just going to draw a face in here, and I'll just pull this up. And then you can erase out the edge. And then on this side, I'm going to pull this back till it aligns with this corner. So now we've got this nice closed off edge like this. And then I like to take those counters and I'll just do a triple click and then a shift triple click, and I'll put them in a group. And I just like to tag those. So ARCH- counter right here. So now I have the ability to toggle all of that on and off, just like this. So now I need to go in and add the uppers, which again, I'm not going to make you watch me do that. But in a second, I'll give you an idea of what this whole thing is going to look like when we're all done. All right, so now we've got our kitchen cabinets ready to go. And remember that one of the cool things about this is because we have all of this geometry in a group, what I can do is I can pick materials and I can apply them to the outside of the groups that these are in. So for example, say that I want countertop materials, we can go down to stone and we can pick one of these countertop styles. And because these are all in a group, notice how it's being applied to everything in the group. And we can do the same thing with the wood. And these are kind of the older cabinet materials, but that's okay. But we can take any of these wood materials and we can apply it to these cabinets as well. So we can use this in order to really quickly set up our cabinets inside of SketchUp Free. All right, so that one got a little bit longer, but leave a comment below. Let me know if you have any questions about anything we talked about. That one was a little bit more advanced than what we've talked about in the past, but once you get the process right, it saves you so much time. So if you do have any questions, leave them down below. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.